Welcome back to another video on my channel, and this video is all about the brand new firmware 3.0 for the Leica SL2. And this upgrade is so feature rich that it almost converts the Leica SL2 into a brand new camera. I remember very well when the Leica SL2-S hit the market, and S stands for sport. The marketing said this is finally a sports camera in the Leica universe, and I became very jealous about some of the features, in particular the video capabilities, but also with recent upgrades the better tracking capabilities in autofocus. But now all these features are also in the Leica SL2 and they all came for free. And clearly we will walk through the differences between firmware 2.0 and 3.0. I also have here a Leica SL2 body which still is on firmware 2.0, so I can try to illustrate what has changed, and we'll basically see that the new capabilities of the Leica SL2 basically converted into a camera which contains an SL2S and now could also easily deserve the letter S for sports. And now let's kick off the video. Let's start with autofocus speed and focus tracking. And I have a couple of videos on my channel where I showed that the Leica SL2 is very well capable of doing action and sports photography. But the autofocus is not the quickest and tracking does not always work. There are cameras in the market who can do this better. And if we look into firmware 2.0 here, so that's the Leica SL2 body where I'm still on firmware 2.0. Let's quickly show this here. So you see 2.0, and we go into the autofocus menu here on the status screen. We have, for instance, face and body detection, we have tracking, and we have zone autofocus and all the other options. And that doesn't look different on the new firmware, but the capabilities and the algorithms have been massively improved. Looking now into the new firmware, let's quickly confirm this here. So under camera information, we have now 3.0 instead of 2.0. Nothing changed in the appearance of the focus menu here. So we have still zone, we have tracking, we have face body detection, but the algorithms implemented now for focus, they are now exactly the same and follow the same pattern as what you have on the SL2S. And eye recognition, face recognition, staying sticky on a body, that has been massively improved, and I feel it in my shooting when I use tracking for my photography. Clearly this also helps you in the video mode because the focus stays where it's supposed to stay, but on the video mode there is much more to say and we come to it in the course of the video. Actually, just a couple of weeks ago I was shooting the new Sigma Sport telezoom here on the Leica SL2. So this is the 150 to 600 millimeter from the Sport series, and this is a very impressive lens for wildlife, but also for shooting, for instance, astrophotography. I will post a video where I think I created the sharpest moon picture I've ever seen on a full frame sensor, and this will come to my channel very soon. But clearly shooting with a lens at 600 millimeter and at a widest open aperture at 600 millimeter of f6.3 is quite a challenge. And the Leica SL2 had also quite some issues and I had to waste some of my shots. Nevertheless, there are some nice shots and let's have a quick look into them before we continue the video. So I think this is proof of evidence that the Leica SL2 is actually working very well with a mega zoom like this one here, but clearly with the improvements on focus tracking and on face body eye detection, this got even better now. And I think if you want to go for sports and action, you can now safely use the Leica SL2 and one of these lenses. There are different mega zoom lenses you can have in the Leica L-mount system. I personally think this one here from the Sport series is a very good one and has my full recommendation. And don't miss my video on my moonshot with that lens on the Leica SL2 and the 1.4 times extender. The next very nice feature, as I think, is enhanced live view, and you come to that if you go into the menu and you go to page number 3 and then you go into live view settings, and here you have your usual choices for exposure preview, which in my case checks all boxes. But then you have a new menu entry which is called Enhanced Live View. And I think the best way to demonstrate what this can do for you is to actually do a little demonstration and show you a demo with Enhanced Live View off and Enhanced Live View on. So for the time being, let's keep it switched off and let's get the room dark here and let's see how the camera reacts in low light. I switched now all lights off in the studio and also the TV in the background, and all light I have available is coming from a single candlelight in the background of what you see here in the live view of the camera, and you basically can see nothing. So if you are shooting in darkness or very low light, you have no way to find focus for your camera and to tweak your parameters in order to get a nice shot. If you now have enhanced live view, that situation changes. Watch what happens if I switch this on now. All of a sudden you get a bright scene in front of you, and the reason is that this new mode, if you switch it on, boosts up the sensitivity of the sensor to enlighten and brightening up the scene in front of you, so you can now actually find focus and can get your parameter settings so that you get a nice shot, a long exposure for instance, in a very dark environment. And I think that's a very nice feature. If you don't have it switched on, immediately everything goes back into darkness. And that is something which is brand new in that new firmware, and I really appreciate it. It's a really good idea by Leica. The next feature is image overlay, and if we look into firmware 2.0 and scroll through the menu, we come here to page number 4, and then we have customize control, and the next entry is user profiles. That is different on the new firmware, so let's go into that here. Let's see what we get. Let's get this a bit closer. And if I go here through the menu on page number 4, under Customize Control, we find a new menu entry which is called Image Overlay. And that is a very interesting one. So let's explore how this feature is working. Let's go into this menu entry, Image Overlay. And first of all, you can switch this on or off. You can define the transparency of an image, and you can choose an overlay image. Now, an overlay image is an image which has been shot with the Leica SL2 or the Leica SL2-S or the Leica SL, and it has to be on the memory card in the camera body. And I have here just illustratively shot one. So this is in our studio here, and I choose this image. Now it is selected, and now I can go back here and say use image overlay on. And if I now switch back to live view, you see that this image is overlaid to what I see in the scene in front of me. And if I want to now take a picture, I have kind of an alignment, and that can be helpful in architectural photography or other situations. You can also do composed images here and stack them together in post-processing, of course. So you could, for instance, have, let's say, a beach scene and a face, a portrait, and in order to get the alignment right, you use image overlay, and then later you compile them together and compose them in post. In the menu we have that parameter transparency. So if we go back to the menu, we have here transparency high and transparency low, and depending on what image we have chosen here, high or low might be, you know, the more meaningful variant depending on what you want to do. And if the transparency is high, it basically changes the opacity of the overlaid image. So if you have a look here, transparency high means you see the scene in front of me a bit more dominant than if I would go back to the menu and change this to low. And now you have more the overlaid image dominating the scene. And that is, of course, a matter of taste. You will see both the scene in front of you and the overlaid image, but you can tweak the transparency here. And then the last parameter here in the menu is reset on turn off. So let's switch this on here. That means whenever I turn off the camera, actually it resets the overlaid image and it should be vanished. So let's have a look. Currently we have the overlay. By the way, let's go here to transparency high. I like this more than the scene in front of me is dominating. Let's switch the camera off. Let's switch it on again, and now the overlaid image should be gone in live view, as you can see here clearly. If we have this parameter set on off, let's do this quickly here, then actually if use image overlay is used and we have selected our frame, then if we switch it off, the overlay should stay and immediately come up again. So let's have a look. We have transparency high. Let's switch the camera off. Let's switch it on again. and you see the image overlay is still there. That's the last parameter in that menu, and we can close that particular chapter on that particular feature. The next new feature concerns the metering methodologies, and let's look into firmware 2.0 first. So let's go here into the menu, let's go to exposure metering, and then we have three options here. We have spot metering, center weighted, and multi-field. And in the new firmware, we have one more option here, which actually is a very smart one. Let's see now what we find in firmware 3.0 as another metering method. So let's get this a bit closer here, like always, and let's go into the metering methods. So we go here into exposure metering, and then we have the usual ones. We have spot metering, we have center weighted, we also have still multi-field, but there is another one which is called highlight weighted. And that's a very smart one because it optimizes the metering and measuring light in a way that highlight recovery is the priority. And that is a good idea because I showed many times in videos on my channel on dynamic range that it is much easier to recover information out of underexposed areas, so recovering out of shadows, than it is to recover information out of overexposed areas. And if the camera and the metering method is paying attention to highlights, that means the rest of the image I can safely correct in post and recover in those areas of the image where it is too dark out of the shadows. So compliments to Leica. I think this is a very smart way, making our life easier in very heterogeneous lighting situations when we take photos. Talking about dynamic range, let me also bring to your attention another feature here, which is in the JPEG settings of the menu. So I go here to JPEG settings, and then if we go into that, we have in firmware 2.0 three parameters to tweak: the JPEG resolution, the level of noise reduction, and the film style. If we look at this in the new firmware, we have the following. If we go here into the menu and the JPEG settings, we have one more menu entry, and that is called IDR and stands for Intelligent Dynamic Range. And that means that the camera algorithm itself will optimize for highlights and shadows, and in particular on dynamic range will optimize to get information out of shadows. And you have several settings here. You can let the camera decide what the best setting might be. You can go for high IDR, standard, low, or you can switch it completely off. Important to note, this is something that concerns only the JPEG images. You still have in the raw file the full information, no matter what's been chosen here under IDR, and that is something professional photographers of course appreciate. I typically anyway shoot in RAW, so this is maybe only a preview what Leica's algorithm can actually get out of an image by optimizing dynamic range. I will do my post-processing myself later on in the RAW file, but for some people who like to shoot in JPEG, that might be a very interesting improvement. The last new feature concerns also only JPEG settings, and let's have a look into firmware 2.0 first to get what's going on here. So let's go into JPEG settings again, and then we have here film style, and film style is kind of the same options as what we have here also on firmware 3.0, but on film style settings we can actually tweak the settings. So for instance, if I want to change the settings on natural here, I can go in and can tweak contrast, sharpness, and saturation. And that has more options now on the new firmware. So let's have a look again what the new firmware is offering here. In the new firmware under JPEG settings, and if we go into film style and go to film style settings, let's maybe choose vivid here, and then if we go into that, we have more options, and I can actually select what I want to tweak here. So this is contrast, this is now highlight, which is new, shadow, which is new, sharpness and saturation we had before. So we have two more options. Besides contrast and sharpness and saturation, we also have highlight now and shadows. And then if I want to tweak that value, I can switch here to the next menu and can basically tweak this here with parameters between -2 and 2. And then I can checkbox this and confirm that this is the setting I want to have for that particular style, which in my case here was vivid. Again, these settings concern only JPEGs. The RAW file will stay untouched, but for JPEG shooters, maybe an interesting alternative if you have the option to tweak this here also for highlights and shadows, and maybe also to get a better preview of what the image could be and how it could look like if you get the post-processing right. So all in an improvement, something in addition, more optionality. I like it. Before turning our attention to the new, and absolutely fantastic video capabilities with this new firmware. Let's mention one last point, and that's in the camera settings here. And if I go to the camera settings, I have now one option here if I scroll all the way down, which is pixel mapping. And pixel mapping is actually helping to identify dead or stuck pixels on a sensor, and by computational algorithms getting them away. And then you don't have to send in your camera, you can just use it and can basically the pixel mapping done, and then dead pixels will be removed and will no longer disturb the image you've taken. The next group of features concern all video capabilities. And here, as I said at the beginning of the video, the SL2 now includes a fully fledged SL2-S. And this really makes the SL2 a perfect video companion if you are into videography. So let's switch into the video mode here by swiping in the usual way. And let's have a look at some of the new features here. So first of all, if we go here into the video format and resolution, a lot of things change. You still have MOV and MP4 here as your type of video you can record. But first of all, on the new firmware, you have no limitation to 30 minutes any longer, in the same way as you don't have that limitation on the Leica SL2-S. So the SL2 has dropped this limitation. You can go beyond, as long, of course, as your SD card is capable of recording longer video and also keeping pace with the codec. The next new feature is more happening behind the scenes, and it's about the way video streaming is recorded on the Leica SL2 with the new firmware. And it's all now on internal 10-bit 4K 60p or 50p with high efficiency video codec in the format H.265 instead of H.264. And that saves space, so between 25 and 50% depending on what you are filming and doing. And that is of course appreciated, and it's basically in the camera firmware where this video compression is taking place. The next upgrade concerns group of pictures in video recording, and it has switched in a new firmware from all intra to long group of pictures, or in the acronym GOP, if you want to look that up, for 4K frame rates higher than 29.97 frames per second. And if you're not in videography, think about a video stream being grouped into group of pictures, and the long GOP method utilizes keyframes, and in between it uses a series of so-called delta frames which only record the differences between the frames, and that makes the recording much more efficient, so you will need less space on your SD card, but you will not compromise video quality. And we can see the data rates actually if we go into the video format and resolution. And let's go to MOV first. If we look into 4K here, you see here, for instance, the long GOP with a 10-bit encoding uses a data rate of 200 megabit per second. And if you go here on the 8-bit encoding, you have 150 Mbps as a data rate. And that is, of course, a guarantee for high quality video, which is stored and recorded in a very efficient way to your camera SD card. We can also see this in the MP4 recording. So let's go back here to MP4. Let's go into 4K, and then you see here, for instance, with 59.94 frames per second, long group of pictures, 150 Mbps in an 8-bit encoding, and here in the 10-bit you have 100 Mbps and so on. So there are lots of options you can choose here how you want to record and encode your video. The quintessence, if you are not into technical details on videography, is that you get high quality video with a comparably low requirement for space on your SD card. For the next feature, let's start to look into firmware 2.0 first. So I switched here into the video mode, and if you go to video settings, let's go, I think this is on page number 2, video settings here. You have basically wind noise reduction, which you can choose, microphone gain, video gamma, and time coding. And that changed in the new firmware. So if we have a look here and turn our attention to the video settings in firmware 3.0, we get more options here. We still have wind noise reduction, microphone gain, video gamma, and time coding, but we also have segmented video on and off. And that is an interesting feature which splits your video stream into 1-minute segments. And that is supposed to protect parts of the video if something goes wrong. Some people will find it tedious to actually reassemble your video by cutting together 1-minute segments. But I think in terms of safety feature, that's an interesting option. You can switch it on and off here in that part here. We also have color bar now, which is another interesting feature I'm going to quickly show. Color bars are typically used as a reference for a correct color grading in video. And there is also a feature here for sound control, which you can use in your post-processing. And if you look into that, here it's switched off. Here you can actually choose 3 different color profiles. And let's check out just one here. Do you hear the sound? That's your sound check. You see here the level of noise and you see the color bars. You can use this if you want to calibrate for colors. That is exactly what videographers want. Let's go out here. Let's go back into the video settings. Let's try another one. So here we have another one. You see that's a different appearance now, and you can tweak this also in terms of the volume. Listen to that here. Off, minus 20 dB, minus 18 dB, minus 12, and that's it. And professional videographers use these type of color bars for color correction, you know, for the calibration of the colors, the way they want to have it, and also for sound calibration, of course. The last new feature in the video settings is a rec frame, and here it's switched off, but if I switch it on and start to record, you already see here a gray rectangle around my live view, and if I now start recording, this will turn into red and indicates to me that the camera actually is recording. And this is a feature which you have on professional video equipment for a long time, like for instance on the Atomos Ninja 5, and they always have there a red rectangle if it is recording, and it's gray if it is not recording. So let's try this out. Let's start to record. You see this turned now into red, and you also see that flashing red dot here, and that indicates to you that the camera currently is recording. You also have IDR, which you can use for still photography here in video, in the way I explained it before for still frames. And you also have on the video style the same options which I showed before in the photography mode. So if I go here into that, I can basically calibrate that and have the same enhanced options here between contrast, highlight, shadow. Highlight and shadow is new, sharpness and saturation. So that's very nice. It basically mirrors the capabilities on the still images side into the videography. We also have a dedicated section now in the settings for slow motion. And if I go here, let's go back to page number 2 into the video format, then we have here now slow motion in full HD. And that is a section which was not there before in firmware 2.0, and the same applies of course if we go into MP4. We have now a dedicated slow motion full HD or 1080p section here with the video coding we can choose. Another feature which professional videographers will love is the waveform monitor, and let me quickly go into that. So it's on page number 3. It's currently switched off, and if I switch it on and go into live view, I get a waveform monitor control window here. And that is, think about it like an enhanced version of a histogram. And in addition to a histogram, it also gives you, for instance, luminance values and all kind of informations videographers love to see. Typically only available in very professional devices and typically external devices, which you can connect to your camera. You can basically drag this around, so where you find it convenient to be placed. And you can also change its size. So this is small, this is medium, this is large, and this is super large. And again, you can drag and drop it wherever you want. Another feature which was carried over from the Leica SL2-S to the Leica SL2 with this new firmware concerns lookup tables. And let's quickly show that. So if I go into video settings in firmware 3.0, I have my usual suspects here, but I also have video gamma like I had before, and then I can choose. For instance, on L-lock here, if I choose that, I can go into the settings and can now not only tweak the sharpness and the lookup table profile, but I also have here custom slots for my own tailor-made lookup tables. And I have 3 here, which I can basically upload to the SD card and use them besides what Leica provided before, the natural and the classic profiles. And I think that is very convenient. You can also choose here where these lookup tables should actually be put out on the EVF LCD or on the HDMI port if you have an external monitor on it, like the Ninja 5 from Atomos, for instance. And you have all kinds of ways to customize this here. Let's go back here into the custom lookup tables, and here you can tweak this even further. So you see currently everything is unused, but you can customize now where your output is appearing, and in this way tweak it tailor-made towards your workflow if you are a videographer. The last feature to demonstrate is follow focus, and that's in my opinion the most impressive new video capability which came with firmware 3.0, because it achieves something which manually is very hard to achieve and needs a lot of training. In order to demonstrate this new feature, let's change lenses here. So let's remove from the body with firmware 3.0 the 24 to 90 millimeter lens, and let's steal from the 2.0 body the 28 millimeter f2.0 lens. And let's get this mounted on the camera body with the firmware 3.0, so we have a wider open aperture and I can better show what this feature is capable of if I have a shallow depth of field. By the way, when I changed lenses, the new firmware package 3.0 immediately recognizes that it also needs to update the lens, which is just happening here. And that's very convenient. So there is a lens firmware upgrade included in firmware 3.0. And whenever you attach a lens which is not upgraded yet, it automatically does this procedure for you. When the procedure completed, you get a notification that the update was successful and you need to restart the camera, which I'm going to do right now. Follow focus is a video feature and I'm going to comment in a moment. I'm also to live demonstrating how this works. So first of all, we have to swipe to the video section, and then we have here in the status screen the option to change to continuous focus, manual focus, or follow focus, or we can do this from the usual menu by focusing and go into focus mode, and then we have the IAF, autofocus single, continuous, manual focus, and follow focus. Now if we choose follow focus, we get a bunch of options here. I come to focus position in a moment in the live demonstration. You can choose whether you want to start follow focus with recording immediately. I have this off. I want to manually control this. You can also tweak, and you will see this in a moment, the follow focus speed. And that's how long does it take if the focus is switching from one subject, for instance, in the background to another subject in the foreground. And you have very low, low, medium, high, and very high. Let's keep this for a moment at medium, which I think is the best way to illustrate what's going on here. And then we have return to. So when the follow focus procedure is done, where do we end up at the end of the procedure? And we can go to the previous setting. We can, the camera letting switch to manual focus, continuous, single focus, or intelligent autofocus. And I have this for the time being at previous setting, which is the most meaningful in my opinion. But some people will also choose manual focus, because in videography, manual focus is actually something that is used very often if you know how to do it, of course. The most interesting menu entry here is focus position. So if we go to focus position, we get a fully programmable live screen here. And that is very, very cool, because I'm going to show you now how this works. So first of all, let's say here is a currently fuzzy Christmas tree with LEDs. Let's say I want to focus on this one. So let me go here and let's get this sharp and crisp. Here we go. I think this is quite nice here. All right, I assign this now to position 1, and I don't program any interval timer here. I come to that later in a second. So I checkbox this, and you see there is now a red rectangle here, which indicates that we have programmed this with a 0-second delay. Let's say next I want to focus on the Sigma lens in the background. So we go here to the Sigma lens. We get this crisp and sharp. Here we go. I think that's it. So I program this now to position number 2, again with 0 delay, and we just checkbox this. And then the last one is my character from The Witcher here, which I also want to get in focus. We can also make this a little bigger here. So let's get the face crisp and sharp. I think that's it. And this goes now to position number 3. Again, a 0 interval, and we checkbox this, and we have programmed this. Now watch what happens. If I want to focus now on my Christmas tree, I just touch here, and the way the focus changes, the timing it needs is exactly the medium length we have chosen before. And you see now my Christmas tree is sharp and the background is fuzzy. If I want to focus on my character from The Witcher, I go to position number 3, and now you see how the face comes in focus, and the Christmas tree now is fuzzy and not sharp. And then the middle position we had was the Sigma lens. So now it changes focus to the Sigma lens. And again, you see the timing here coming from a medium time interval. The flex I get from not assigning any timing here on these buttons, so you see they are all 3 on 0 seconds, is I have full manual control. So let's take the video for a moment. Let's say I want to start with the Christmas tree and have the background blurry. And now let's start recording. So now it is recording. Now I can choose, let's switch to the Sigma lens here, and it's changing focus now to the Sigma lens. And now I can go back to the Christmas tree, and it will always nail the focus in the way I programmed it. And let's say we want to end that sequence with that character from The Witcher. And then the rest is blurry based on a shallow depth of field. Let's stop this. And now we are good to go. I'm going to show that video now, and you will see the effect and how smooth the transition is given what I filmed here.
So your tears been running like a waterfall. Thought the stars would never let you down. And you keep on thinking you could save yourself.
What I just demonstrated was a manual focus pull. And videographers talk more about focus pulling here than follow focus like Leica does it. And I can also automate this now. And there is a little start button here which I can use. And let's say I start with my Christmas tree again. And let's program now the timing before the focus switches. So let's go here to 2 seconds. Let's checkbox this, and then we are done. And now it stays 2 seconds in the focus on that Christmas tree here. And let's say I want to switch to the Sigma lens and also want to have here basically 2 seconds of delay. Let's go in this way, but you can individually program this, of course. And let's say the other one here is also for the Witcher character here for 2 seconds. And you see now here, if we checkbox this all, now this changed here from 0 seconds to 2 seconds on each of these programmed focus points. And if I start this now, it starts to switch focus. First of all, it goes to my Christmas tree. And you see here always the timing. Then there is a delay. It automatically goes now to the Sigma lens in the background. And then the next one kicks in and it starts to focus now on that character from The Witcher, and then the sequence is completed. So let's record this and let's see how this works in a fully fledged video sequence. I go on start. Now my tree should come into focus. Then it switches back to the Sigma lens and you see the middle box is now counting down. And then it switches to my character from The Witcher, and now it counts down the timer on that character here. And that's the complete sequence. I think this is a super interesting, super exciting feature, because if you want to do this manually live and get your focus switching from background to foreground and somewhere in the middle, and you typically face then the problem that you overdo it, so your focus is a little bit too much in the fore or background. And if you can program this before and then just trigger the sequence by pushing the start button or triggering it manually for the 3 different focus memory positions we have here, that is a super feature for videographers. Which also brings me to the end of this video. I hope you liked it. I've tried to cover everything that's new. Basically, the Leica SL2 is a brand new camera now and fully includes a Leica SL2-S. If you liked that video, don't forget to drop me a thumbs up. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned on my channel. There's always more to come. Stay safe and healthy. And of course, peace out.